Okay, we thank Hashem. We're able to learn. In the schus of our learning, we should have the base of English. Everyone should be well. Should be safe. We're going to start in Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. And let's see where we can start. That would make sense. Okay. But I think what we need to do is we need to start from we'll start from the words Ihachi Chalatz Litzares Niftera Chayes Batzares Rachel Mi Miftera. I don't even know how to tell you where that is. It's I guess it's about 15 lines up. The line in my Gemara, the line starts with Hatzaris Kamar, Hatzaris da Alma. Okay, now we're going to start Ihachi Chalatz Litzares Niftera Chayes. Okay, what happened over here was that Shmuel has a statement that if there were two sisters that were married to two brothers, right. The brothers died, and so now Chalitza Yibam needs to be performed on the two sisters. Problem is that
you can't take both because then there would be Zika between.
Yeah, you can't marry the sisters. You can't do Yibam on one of the sisters, but you have to do Chalitza. That's the rule. You can't do Yibam, but you have to do Chalitza. Now, it turns out these two sisters happen to have a co-wife. Each of them have a co-wife. So you weren't allowed to do Yibam on the sisters.
Is that because of the co-wife, or
no,
is that
no? You can't do Yibam on the sisters because it's considered Achais Zikukasim. Each wife, each one of those widows is a sister of a woman that he could have been married to, and that's considered like a quasi-marriage, and you're not allowed to marry a woman and her sister.
Right, but in this case, both sisters are in separate marriages.
They're in separate marriages, but for Ruvain, who was the brother that's going to step in and do Yibam on one of them, it's the sister of the woman that he was able to marry, which he was supposed to marry, which is Achais Zikukasim. So he can't do Yibam. But he could do Chalitza. Okay, so do Chalitza. The problem is that there's co-wives there. And the co-wives, the rule is that any type of Chalitza which couldn't have been a Yibam is considered a weak Chalitza, and it won't exempt the co-wife. And you'll have to do, usually, you take one of the wives does Chalitza, and that exempts the whole rest of the, what would be, harem.
You can't marry the rival wife of a close relative of Chalitza.
Yeah, so what Shmuel says is that Yibam couldn't have been performed on the sisters. And so therefore you have to do Chalitza. But the Chalitza is not satisfactory. You'll have to do Chalitza on the co-wife as well. So Shmuel suggested that you do Chalitza on the co-wife, and that would exempt the sisters, but the Chalitza on the sisters won't exempt the co-wife. So that was Shmuel's statement. Okay, so now the Gemara says, we have a question. Yeah. Let me go back. I have to go back a few lines. Let's go up a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to be too confusing for us. Let's go up for Ihachi Chalatz La'achayis Amaylei Nifter Tzaris. The Gemara says like this. If Chalitza was done to the sisters, I went up like about 6 lines. Why would the Tzaris not be exempt? Bishleim Tzara de Rachel. We have over here, our case would be Shimon and Levi, all right? Shimon and Levi are married to Leah and Rachel. And they're also married to, what were the names over there in your picture? Chana and Miriam. So whose wife was Chana?
Shimon's.
Shimon's wife, Chana Leah. That's the name that goes together. Shimon's wife is Chana and Leah. Okay, and Levi's married to Rachel and?
It's Rachel and Chana, and the other one is Leah and Miriam.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
That's what it says.
There goes my Chana Leah. Okay, Rachel and Chana, and Leah and Miriam.
Yeah.
So Shimon's wife is Leah and Miriam, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Shimon's married to Leah and Miriam.
No, Levi, sorry. Levi's married, so.
Levi's married. I can say it anyway. It works. I just don't want to mix up the ones with the Koran.
Yeah.
Okay, let me keep it simple. Ignore the pictures in the Koran. So Shimon is married to Leah, and Levi's married to Rachel. That way, I have the older sister there, and he has another wife, Chana, and Levi has another wife, Miriam. Okay, so what happened was like this. Shimon passed away, Levi passed away, comes along Reuven, and is going to do either Yibam or Chalitza on them. So we said, we claim over here that he can't do Chalitza on the sisters because that would not exempt the tzaras. But if he does Chalitza on the tzaras, that would exempt the sisters. So 1 second. Why won't it exempt the tzara? I get why the second sister. You see, Chalitza could have been done on Leah first. Comes to Rachel. There would be a problem. The kivan the Chalatz Leah. Once Chalitza was done on the first sister, and then V'had the Chalatz Rachel. Then he does Chalitza on Rachel. Havale Chalitza de Rachel, Chalitza Psula. That would have been an invalid Chalitza. 1 second, I just lost the. Yeah, you there? Ella Tzara de Leah Tipater. But on the first Chalitza, it should have worked. Okay. We're saying over here that that really Shmuel holds Ein Zika. Shmuel's holding Ein Zika, which would mean that that immediately there's two sisters there. Really, he should be able to do Chalitza on one of the sisters, and that would exempt the co-wife. Why? Because he could have done Yibam as well. If you hold Ein Zika, then Achai Sikukasa is nothing.
Right.
There's no problem with Achai Sikukasa. The whole problem is, what was that issue over there? Was in Levatel Mitzvahs Yavmin, but there's no problem with Achai Yibam could have been performed. It's just a rabbinic decree. So if Yibam could have been performed, so then the Chalitza is perfectly valid. So for Leah, who was the first sister, that should have covered the co-wife as well. I get the issue with the second sister because that's the Achais Chalutzasai. That's the sister of the of someone that was Chalitza was performed on. That's much worse than Achais Zikukasai. Those are two different terms. Achais Chalutzasai is also not allowed to be married, but that's much more strict. Achais Zikukasai should have been Yibum should have been permissible. So Gemara is asking that the first sister should have been a perfect Chalitza. The second sister, I understand the problem. So the Gemara answers, "My line iftir tzaris nami de kamar." You want to hear what it means that the co-wife wasn't exempt from the first sister? It doesn't mean that. It's a tzara de Rachel. You're right. It's only the second sister that it doesn't work.
The one that has a sibling, or just the one that's.
So in other words, now I have Shimon and Levi. Shimon's wife is Leah. Levi's wife is Rachel, let's say. If Reuven comes and does Yibam on Leah, Chalitza on Leah, that's going to be a valid Chalitza, and it's going to cover the co-wife as well. And if Reuven does Chalitza on Rachel, the younger one, that wouldn't work. So that's what the Mishnah means, that you should do Chalitza on the co-wife, and that would cover the sister. But it's really only one of these sisters that it doesn't work. Gemara says, but that's a problematic term because v'hatzaris kamar. But the Gemara says that Shmuel said it in a plural, that the yibam on the tzaris needs to be done, and not the yibam on the sisters. It won't cover the tzaris. Tzaris is the plural for a co-wife, not just one of them. The Gemara says tzaris to alma. That's referring to the general world. If this case would happen other times, then the same law would apply. It's not referring to Leah and Rachel. It's referring to Rachel in every other case where there's going to be two sisters. That's a way of getting out of a plural problem. You just say it's not referring to, in this case, there's a plural, saying, Tzaris de Alma, it's the plural of the world. If you want to say that really Leah Chalitza would have been perfect on, the older sister. The whole problem is doing Chalitza on Rachel, because it won't cover the tzara. Now the Gemara asks, "Batzaras Rachel mi miftera." So if you do chalitza on the tzara, would it really work on Rachel? That's what Shmuel's suggesting, that you do it on the co-wife. Would it really work? Would it really work to cover the sister? Would that chalitza be good? Take a look at this Gemara. V'hatanan, but we have a mission that says like this. Asur adam bitzaras krevas chalutzasei. A person is not allowed to marry the second wife of the relative of his chalitza. Let's start backwards. Who did he do chalitza on the co-wife of Rachel? He's not allowed to marry no. He wants to do chalitza on the co-wife of Rachel. But who did he do chalitza on first? On Leah. You told me that the first sister chalitza could have been performed on and it would have covered the co-wife. So who did he do chalitza on first? On Leah. What's Leah's relative? Rachel, the sister. The co-wife of the chalitza's relative is also forbidden. That means that you couldn't have done yibam on her anyway. So why are you telling me that the co-wife would have covered Rachel? So the Gemara says Shmuel nami hischal v'la hischal kamar. Shmuel is also saying that he's starting to do it, but not completed. It goes like this: Hischal ba'achayis. If you started to do chalitza with the sisters, it means if you started with Leah, then la yigmar bitzaris. You can't complete with the chalitza with just one. You have to do chalitza on both. As if the first set of wives, Shimon's family, Reuven steps in and does chalitza on Leah. Then in the second family, which is Levi's family, chalitza on one of them itself would not work. You have to do chalitza on both.
But he would be allowed to have done yibum on her, right?
On Leah, but not on the second family. Second family, it's already finished.
On the co-wife, on the relative of the co-wife, if he chose, he could have done yibum on her, but because he chose to do
he can't do yibum on her.
Why?
He can't do yibum on her because, the full reason is in the Gemara somewhere else, but he wouldn't have been able to do yibum. Yeah, I think it's a decree of some sort that it's why you can't do yibum there. But basically, let's just compare it to a achos chalutzase, which you're not allowed to do yibum on. A sister of someone that you did chalitza on, you can't do yibum on. And this is not the actual sister. This is the co-wife of the sister.
The relation is not a blood relation. It's a co-wife.
Right.
And if she's not forbidden in the co-wife,
Right.
he should be allowed to do a yibum.
You should be, right. But there's a decree that doesn't allow that. And because it's not allowed, so what we're saying is that if it's really not allowed, then even chalitza itself shouldn't work because a weak chalitza doesn't cover both wives. So therefore, the Gemara is saying they have to do chalitza on both. Yeah. Rashi doesn't give me the full reason. He says v'tay mahasim mefarish. Rashi says the explanation is given over there why this is prohibited.
So is the Kiddush here that the ceremony doesn't work for them as a group up until now? Everything we talked about takes care of.
Yeah.
So
And we're saying this basically this daf is about that there are certain times when chalitza needs to be done on every wife. Why? Because the chalitza is weak and it will only cover that one wife. You have to do it on the other ones as well. Yeah. So what the Gemara just said is that if you started with chalitza on Leah, then in the second marriage, in Rachel, in Levi's marriage, you have to do chalitza on both wives. The Tanan, as it was taught, Asa Adam B'tzaras Krevas Chalutzase. Like we said before, that he's not allowed to really do Yibum on Rachel's co-wife, which means, therefore, if he does chalitza on her, then it doesn't cover Rachel either. You have to do both. However, Hischel B'tzara is if in the beginning, initially, the first chalitza that he did was not on one of the sisters. It was on the co-wife, the non-relative here. So then, Yigbar Af B'chayis, then you can even do Yibam should have been effective, and therefore you can do chalitza on the sister. The Tanan, Mutter Adam B'krevas Tzaras Chalutzasi. This is an exactly opposite case. But you have to start from the end. Who was the one that he did chalitza on? On the co-wife of Leah. Mutter Adam, a person is permissible B'krevas Tzaras Chalutzasi, on the relative of the chalutza, on the relative of the co-wife of the chalitza. That means that the co-wife did chalitza, the other co-wife, which is the relative, Leah, her sister Rachel is permitted to Reuven. It's odd that it doesn't work both ways here. It would work like this, that if chalitza is done on Leah, then he's forbidden not only to Rachel, but even to the co-wife of Rachel. If chalitza was done on Leah's co-wife, then of course Leah he can't do Yibam on Leah because he just did chalitza. But what about Rachel? He would be allowed to. We will be allowed to do Yibam. So therefore, the chalitza should work to cover both of them. Okay, that's how we are explaining what Shmuel said. That when he says you don't do chalitza on the sisters, you only do on the co-wives of the sisters. What he really meant was that if you did chalitza on the sisters, then you're going to have to do on both. But if you did chalitza on the co-wife, initially that would cover the second one also. That you'd be allowed to do chalitza even on the sister. Yeah.
How is that different than? I don't see the fine line difference between what I asked and this.
Yeah. So,
Well, when you're saying that it's a rabbinical decree,
on Daf Mem Beis. Yeah, wait for that. This looks very highly complex. Yeah. Yeah, it's the bottom Mishnah on Mem.
when I was in New York, I used to have a programmer that worked for me, and we used to get to very difficult programming issues. And it says, keep going, we'll jump off that bridge when we get to it.
So if you have a Gemara that has Daf Mem, if you have a Gemara like that, it says, it talks about the relatives of the one that you did chalitza on, who's permissible and who's prohibited. Yeah. Okay. Ravashi comes along Ravashi and answers this a little different. He says, Lailam Kedamrit. Really, as we said before, that what are we dealing with? That Shmuel would probably hold Yeshika, maybe. So, Mishum delay alima zika l'shvi l'tzara ke'erva. Yeah. What Ravashi means, not that the Yeshika, not the Yeshika. What Ravashi means is that two sisters. It means literally that the two sisters, chalitza on the two sisters, would not be effective for the tzara, but chalitza on the tzara would be effective for the two sisters. That's a problem because we said that he wasn't really allowed to marry those co-wives of the tzara. So Ravashi says, no, it's not true. Why wasn't he allowed to marry the co-wife? That's not considered an erva. There's zika there, but that's not strong enough because he holds ein zika. The actual sister is a problem, but the co-wife is not a problem. Look, chalitza was performed on Leah, or the co-wife, so he's not allowed to marry. He's not allowed to do yibam on Rachel. Fine, but Rachel's co-wife is perfectly fine. Okay, Tani Kavaseder Ravashi. You have a brisa that supports that. If chalitza was done on the sisters, it doesn't cover the co-wives. But if it was done on the co-wives, it would exempt. My timer, what's the reason? How could it work? If you can't do on the sisters, you shouldn't be allowed to do on the co-wife either. Gemara says, no, you can, because the strength of the connection to the co-wife is not strong enough to consider them as the sister itself, which was prohibited. Amar Rabba Bar Mamal Amani Beishamai. Rabba Bar Mamal says, this turns out that this sounds like Beishamai. Ditnan Beishamai Matir Natzar Slachen. Beishamai allows that if there was a relative, if one of the wives was a relative, one of the widows was a relative, so Yibam cannot be performed on any of them. That was Beis Hillel's view. And Beis Shammai said no, only the relative Yibam couldn't be performed on, but on the co-wives it could be. That's what you're saying over here. I have a relative that I can't do Yibam on. I have a sister, right? Rachel and Leah are sisters. You can't do Yibam, but on the co-wives you can do. That's Beis Shammai's view. So the Gemara says, so why do you say only chalitza? According to Beis Shammai, you can also do Yibam. So the Gemara says, Ramamar, we have an answer for that. I'm sorry, I skipped a line. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. We're going to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. What did Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say? That we had a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that we didn't want there to be such a machlekes about who, that Beis Hillel wouldn't be allowed to marry people from Beis Shammai, to the extent that Beis Shammai's families would be considered mamzerim, if the scenario was played out. So they said, let's not have Beis Shammai do that. He said, let's never play it out to paskin like Beis Shammai, because it's going to affect the families and the Jewish people. So we should only do chalitza. So if that's the case, you should be okay. So that's the teretz. That's why you can't do Yibam because of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because he didn't want people to paskin like Beis Shammai outright. Says, what are you telling me? Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, the Gemara, we learned this before, says that because of certain persecution, he wasn't able to institute this. Gemara says, I understand Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri wasn't able to finish this psak, but afterwards they did finish this. And even though Beis Shammai allows the tzara to have Yibam, but because of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and afterwards, because of their institution, they only do chalitza. Basically, what we're left here is that the chalitza could be performed on the co-wife, which would agree with the Beis Shammai. So why couldn't you do Yibam? That would agree with the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that we stopped the Yibam in being performed. Bailahu. Gemara is a question. Is a new Gemara. But you can't forget the old ones. We mentioned that chalitza is supposed to be performed on the one that's going to be the strongest chalitza. If you do it on the weaker chalitza, on the one that's going to be weaker, what would be weaker? Weaker means that yibum couldn't have been performed on. Weaker means that she had already received the get. Weaker means that she was the one that received mimer, which is a type of kiddushin. Now, why does that make her weaker? Well, the get would make her weaker because it looks like she's already partially separated. Now you have like just, you still need to do a little chalitza left, right? Then why would the mimer be weaker? Because even after the chalitza, you still need a get. So we want a chalitza with an oomph. So and if it doesn't have that, then that's not the one that you choose. So here, the Gemara has a question: Bailas aget the bailas mimer ezemem kedemis. Which one is better? Which one has more of an emphasis? Which one works better? So one of a brother dies. He has two wives. One of them, mimer was performed on. That means a type of kedushin, which means the brother said, "This is the one I'm going to marry." The other one, a get was given to, which means this is the one that's out. But a get doesn't really work, and a mimer is not really complete. So which one should get the chalitza now? Balas a get adifa, mishum da aschalba. Maybe you should do the balas. You should do the chalitza on the balas get. Well, that's where you started already getting rid of her. Maybe you should continue with that. So the aschalba b'chalitza, the gerushin probably is supposed to say, "Dilma balas mimer adifa." Maybe you should do on the one that has mimer mishum da krayva because she was the one that was about to be married, and then the chalitza would really break this. Maravashi says, "Come on, listen, Rabbi Gamliel sheish gerach mimer get." It turns out that there's a Gemara later on that says like this: if a get was given to one wife, and then a get was given to another wife, the second get is nothing. She was, whatever was taking place was already done in the first one. So, and also mimer, you can't do mimer twice. Mimer is the type of kedushin, a betrothal to one of the sisters. You betrothed one of the sisters, you can't do it on the other one. The second one is nothing. However, Rabbi Gamliel does say that you can do a get after a mimer, and you have to be concerned about that get. And you have to do mimer after a get, and you have to be concerned about that mimer. It's only when you double a get or double a mimer. So Rabbi Gamliel was made about this. That if they gave a get, but the get doesn't cover everything, because this was a Yevama. Yevama only goes out with chalitza. Get only is what you do in a regular marriage. So
you have to give it a get, you still have a chance to do Yibum.
Yeah. There's a problem of Yibum because after you give a get, it says
You broke away from that.
you broke away. It says Shuvla Yivna. You should not rebuild that house. There's a problem over there. Okay.
So what exactly does the get do here?
It doesn't really do anything. It's just it looks like that she started to get divorced. It looks like that. Yeah. So it's sort of like a breaking away. It's like a quasi chalitza, but it doesn't really work.
Breaks the house.
Yeah. It causes shuvla yivna, that he should not do yibam on her afterwards. That's what it would cause. Yeah. So because Rabbi Gamliel agrees, sheish get achamaymar maymar get, so get adif, if the get would have been strong, leilahani maymar abasrei, then you wouldn't be allowed to do maymar afterwards on the co-wife, right? The maymar adif, and if maymar is strong, then leilahani get abasrei, then you wouldn't be allowed to do a get afterwards if one of those really works. Elalav shmamina ki adadin and shmamina. So the Gemara says basically they're both equal. You can do on either one. What was our question? Which one would the chalitza be stronger on? The Gemara proves that they're both equal because Rabbi Gamliel doesn't consider either of them to be stronger than the other one. If it would have been stronger, then the mimer wouldn't have worked after the get, or the get wouldn't have worked after the mimer. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, two sisters that fall to one brother. He said like this: Shimon and Levi were married, and Reuven's going to do Yibam. Shimon and Levi had both Rachel and Leah as wives. Shimon and Levi passed away. Reuven's going to do Yibam on Rachel and Leah and Rachel. Chalitza l'rishaina is Rav's view. He does chalitza on the first one, let's say Leah. Putra. Leah can now go and marry anyone else. Chalitz l'shniya. He does chalitza on the second one. Putra. She can marry whoever she wants. So far, so good, right? That's easy. Mesa Rishaina. Turned out, it's unfortunate in the family, for Shimon passed away, then Levi passed away, and then Shimon's wife passes away. So now, is Rachel the remaining widow of Levi? Is Rachel prohibited in Yibum to Reuven? While Leah was alive, it was the sister of someone that he was supposed to marry. But look, even if he would have been married to Leah, even if Reuven was married to Leah and Leah passed away, he would then be allowed to marry Rachel.
Right.
Because a wife's sister, after the wife passes away, is allowed to marry her. So here, it's the sister of a Zakuka, of someone that he was supposed to marry. Sounds like she should for sure be permitted. Mesa Rishaina, Mutter B'Shniya. He's allowed to do Yibam on the second one. And for sure, if Rachel passed away, for sure he should be allowed to marry, do Yibam on Leah. Why is that a Kal V'Chaima? Why is that a for sure?
That is the mitzvah of
Yeah. Yeah. Why? Mishum dehavi Yevamos shehutra v'nesra v'chazra v'hutra tachsel arishan. Take a look at it like this. Shimon passed away. I know there's another sister here, but she's happily married to Levi. So Reuven immediately has an obligation to do Yibam on Leah. Right? Only problem is, a few months later, Levi passes away. He didn't do Yibam yet on Leah. Oh, so now it's a sister. Leah's now a sister to another woman that he has to do Yibam on. So, he can't do Yibam.
Right.
But Rachel passed away. So it goes back to the original heter that he had originally. And we have a rule that hutra, v'nesra, v'chazra, v'hutra, it goes back to hetera rishon. It goes back to the original. Because it started off good. It only got messed up in the middle because Levi passed away, and now leaving the sister of the woman that he was supposed to do Yibam on. So, but now that the sister passed away, it goes back to Leah.
Did he have to stop Mimer to do this, or
no, we're not saying anything about that. Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan is not as clear as lenient as Rav is with this, because Rav just allowed not only to do Yibam on Leah if Rachel passed away, but Rav even allowed to do Yibam on Rachel if Leah passed away. Now Rachel was never permitted to Reuven, because when Rachel's husband passed away, Levi, at that time, Leah was already waiting for Yibam, which is her sister. So there was never a permissibility for Reuven to do Yibam on Rachel. So Rabbi Yochanan says the following. Rav allowed that, but Rabbi Yochanan says no. Mesa Shniya, if Leah passes away, not Leah, I'm sorry, Rachel. If Rachel passed away, Mutter B'Rishaina, then he's allowed to marry Leah, which was the one that was originally permissible. But if Leah passes away, Asa B'Shniya, he's not allowed to do Yibam on Rachel. She never was permissible for him. My timer. If I can't apply the verse that the Yavam should live with the Yevama at the time of the passing of the husband, then it never comes into effect later. At the moment of Levi's passing, Rachel was not eligible. And so the verse doesn't apply. So therefore, it's a regular sister-in-law that you're not allowed to marry. The person's not allowed to marry a sister-in-law. There's only a specific heter if died without children, the mitzvah of Yibam. But because at the moment of passing, the mitzvah of Yibam wasn't there, so then it's as if, listen to this expression, this is like a sister-in-law that has children, which you're not allowed to marry. Okay. The Gemara asks, for Rav Leslie Haisvara, Rav doesn't hold of this. Well, how is Rav just mater Yibam on Rachel because Leah passed away? Rav, Rav has this exact same statement, the same words as Rabbi Yochanan has. And Rav says that it's permissible. It doesn't make sense. How could you say that? The answer is that just because they have the same words doesn't mean that it means the same thing. Goes like this. You know what Rav is talking about? Rav's saying this. Rav's talking about Levi. Shimon is married to Leah. Levi is married to Rachel. Shimon passes away. There's a mitzvah of Yibam on Levi to marry the widow of Shimon. The only problem is that he's married to her sister. So the mitzvah of Yibam falls off. There is no mitzvah of Yibam now. Now it's just a regular sister-in-law. But what happens a few months later? Levi's own wife passed away, Rachel. Now, would he be allowed to marry his wife's sister? Usually, yes. The problem is that this is not only his wife's sister, which means it's his sister-in-law, but it's also his sister-in-law from his brother, and that's prohibited. It's not just what becomes permissible when the wife passes away, the wife's sister, the sister-in-law. But what's prohibited is the brother's wife, which is also the sister. That was never permissible because at the time of death of Shimon, Levi's wife was still alive. So that's what Rav meant. That was a Issa Daraisa. Over here, we have a different story. Aval Hacha, Zika Derabananu. Over here, we're not talking about Levi marrying Shimon's wife and being married to two sisters. We're talking about Shimon and Levi are married to sisters. We're talking about Reuven stepping in and doing Yibam on the second wife, on Rachel. Why wasn't he allowed to do Yibam on Rachel? He said, well, it was the sister of someone that he was Zakok Yibam. There was an attachment there because he also had to do Yibam on Leah. That's a rabbinic law. When Leah passes away, you can do on Rachel. That's a very good answer for Rav. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina has a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Really, the question's on Rav also. For whatever reason, it's on Rabbi Yochanan. Arba Achen. You have 4 brothers. Beis Mem Nesuas Beis Achayos. 2 of them are married to 2 sisters. How did we do this? We said Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Levi, Yehuda are married to 2 sisters, and now Reuven and Shimon are going to turn out to be the Yavams. Levi and Yehuda passed away, so the rule was, we learned it in our Mishnah, that you can't do Yibam, you can only do Chalitza. According to what we just learned, what's the reason for this? Because it's Achay Siku Kasei. If one of the wives would pass away, then according to Rabbi Yochanan, depending which one, it's possible that Yibam could be performed. So 1 second. Va'amai, why can't you do Yibam? Leiku chad minayu lachlitzla l'shniya. Do Chalitza on Rachel. What happens now? That leaves the other one open. And which one is open? Leah. That was the first one. That was the one that Yibam could have been performed on by Ruvain at the very beginning, before Yehuda passed away. Which is the rule is Tachsel Terishin. Once Chalitza is performed on the second wife, the first wife goes back to the to be permissible. We had a rule that you're not allowed to marry a the sister of a woman that you did chalitzase. Was you weren't allowed to marry the sister of the woman that you did chalitza on. That was the rule. What's happening here is that he's not the one that did chalitza; it's his brother. He's allowed to marry her. He never did chalitza on her. The brother did chalitza. You know what Rabbi Yechon responds to this? I don't know who taught that Mishnah. Don't ask me from that Mishnah. That's not an accurate Mishnah. Whoa, that was our whole Mishnah. It says, why does Rabbi Yechanan have to do away with the Mishnah? He could have answered that you do chalitza on one and you do yibam on the other. He could have just, read the Mishnah. It says harei elu choltzais. That means one of them you do chalitza on, and then the second one you can do yibam. Gemara says you can't say that because choltzais katani. It says a plural. We've had that question before and we've resolved it. We said that it's not talking about both of these. We're talking about if this scenario would ever occur, then the rule would be that you do chalitza on any of those. So that's the plural of the world, not the plural of these two. So it says, well, harei elu, behold these two. Okay, so the grammar won't allow that answer. We have a good teretz. Why doesn't Rabbi Yechanan learn the Mishnah that chalitza was done on Leah? And according to Rabbi Yechanan, which one would become permissible? Only if chalitza was done on Rachel, then Leah would come back to be permissible. But here, one of the brothers went and did chalitza on Leah. Rachel will never be permissible because when Rachel was eligible for Yibam or chalitza, at that time, the sister was alive, and there was a chesed kukase. It wasn't really Yibam wasn't eligible. Rabbi Yechanan would never allow that. So the Gemara says choltzais lechatchila ketani. When it says choltzais, it means that there's really no solution. Okay. Why does Rabbi Yechanan have to do away with the whole Mishnah and say that it's not accurate? Rabbi Yechanan could say that it's a rabbinic decree. In one scenario, this would work, but in another scenario, it won't work. It depends which sister gets chalitza first. Let Rabbi Yechanan say it's a gzeira that you may do it wrong. So it says, it says that Yibam does not work. If Yibam would really work, but it's just a decree that we don't do Yibam, then it wouldn't say V'lei Mesyabmes. Maybe there's another problem over here. We mentioned this before, that if Yibam would be performed by the first brother, then if Reuven does Yibam on Levi's wife, then what's going to happen if Yehuda does Yibam on if how do we do this? If Shimon does Yibam on Yehuda's wife also, so then if one of the brothers passes away, then Yibam won't be able to be performed. No, that's the 1 second. What was that?
Second Rashi.
Yeah, we said that if Yibam is performed by one of the brothers, if he passes away, then you won't be able to do Chalitza or Yibam on this wife because it's going to be his wife's sister. And so she's going to end up without Yibam or Chalitza. Yeah, it'd have to be if Yibam is performed by both brothers. If Yibam is performed by both brothers, that's what it'd have to be. If one of them then passes away, then he won't be able to perform Yibam. So therefore, we recommend that you do Chalitza instead of Yibam. That way, it's not going to get into this problem. That sounds like a huge chashash. I think I'm missing something here. Okay, maybe there's a gzeira. Let's just leave it at this. Maybe there's a gzeira of Shema Yamas, and then we won't be able to perform Yibam, and that's why we say that you do Chalitza. The Gemara says Rabbi Yechon Lamisle Chayesh. We don't say Rabbi Yechon isn't concerned about that. V'lei malei Rabbi Lazarhi. Let's say that it's just the opinion of Rabbi Lazar. Why does Rabbi Yochanan have to say that this Mishnah is not accurate? Let him just say the Mishnah is this obscure opinion that holds that once she's prohibited at one moment, she never becomes permissible again. Not like the way we said before. Just say it follows that opinion. Gemara says, "Me the Sefer Rabbi Lazar, Reish Lav Rabbi Lazar." I have Rabbi Lazar in that Mishnah. Rabbi Lazar says that there's a machlekes b'sham and b'siluf, right? We had Rabbi Lazar quoting something. So if you can't say that the Tanna Kamma is Rabbi Lazar, the Tanna Kamma is Rabbi Lazar, if the Sefer is Rabbi Lazar, even though it's not saying the same point. Okay. Why don't we say that both Levi and Yehuda passed away at the same exact moment? And then there is no one that came into the world in a way of heter. What do we mean that one came in the world of heter? Because one brother passed away, Levi passed away, his wife. You could do Yibaman. There's no problem. The only problem was several months later, Yehuda passed away. Oh, that's a problem. Now we can't do Yibam. But let's say that Shimon and that Levi and Yehuda passed away at the same moment. Then Yibam was never permissible. And it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that things could be exactly precise at exactly the same moment. They both passed away. The Gemara says, the Tana would never just give a Mishnah that follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that things happen exactly at the same moment. There's always one is a second before, one's a second after. We have another teretz. Maybe you could say that we don't know which brother died first. And that's why we do Chalitza. Says what does it mean that if they did Yibam, you have to divorce, if that's the case? On the first one, we would say, well, the first one that did Yibam, who allowed you to do Yibam? Elashniya, Amar, but the second person, after the first brother does Yibam, you know what he's going to say? He says, Chavroi, Shniya Yibam. My brother did Yibam on Rachel. Shniya over here means the Rachel. And I'm doing, this is Rabbi Yochanan talking, and I'm doing Yibam on Leah. I should be allowed to stay with Leah because she was the one that was permissible at the beginning. I know Rishayim Yibam, but I'm doing Yibam on the first one. I know the Ka'amalei Achayis Eni Mission. That's Rabbi Yochanan said that I don't know who taught this because otherwise we have no real solution to figure out how this Mishnah could work. We can't go like the other opinion. It can't be that it's only lechatchila. It can't be that that means only one of them. We went through every option. Okay. Let's do one more. Tanan, it was taught in the Mishnah. We said like this: 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Brothers pass away. You can't do Yibam because It's a chesed kukase. However, it said that if one of those wives, for example, Leah, would have been the mother-in-law of Reuven, because he happened to marry Levi's and Leah's daughter, and now the father-in-law passed away, and now he ends up the yibam on his mother-in-law. That doesn't make sense. So she's not even counted. So therefore, he can do a full yibam on Rachel, and the other one would not be allowed to do yibam on either of them because they're both a chesed kukasi. The Gemara asks, if you follow the way the logic of the Gemara is running now, Salka daitach the nafla chamaisa tchila. Must have been that the mother-in-law was first. Okay. Amai, what's the issue? Leiku chasam liyabim hach the ena chamaisa beresha. Do yibam on Rachel, which was not the mother-in-law. What happened originally? Who passed away first? Levi. That leaves Leah eligible for Yibam. So either of the brothers. Well, actually not. Only that's eligible to only to Shimon, not to Reuven. So Shimon could have done Yibam at that moment. Then Yehuda passed away. Oh, now it's a problem. It's a problem for Shimon to do Yibam. But once here we don't doesn't need to die. Here we can do Yibam. Here, Reuven can't do Yibam on his mother-in-law, but he does Yibam on Rachel. So then Leah goes back to being permissible to Shimon, like she was originally. So v'tasla teirishon. Amar Papakin the naflahach teina chamaisa beresha. Talking about we are the one that wasn't the mother-in-law died first. So that's why it never goes back to being and it never goes back to being happy. Okay.
Thank you.
Good day.
Have a good day.